Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for this Domestic Violence Victim Resource Panel. We are very excited to have you. We are looking forward to sharing more about the state services that are available to survivors of domestic violence. My name is Linda Cletto. I'm the Executive Officer of the California Victim Compensation Board. And as you all know, October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. We want to recognize the strength of survivors and highlight the services and resources available. So we're excited about today's discussion. It'll be a chance for all of you to learn more about state resources. If you have questions during the webinar, please use the Q&A chat box and we will answer them as we move along. I'd like to introduce today's moderator, Krista Tolan. She is the Executive Director of the California Partnership to End Domestic Violence. Krista, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Linda. Thank you all for being with us today for this panel. I'm really looking forward to hearing from some of our state agencies about how we respond as a state of California to the issue of domestic violence and the needs of survivors. As we get started, just to introduce myself and this issue, I want to share a bit of background about the rates and prevalence of domestic violence here in California. Domestic violence includes a wide range of behaviors that goes beyond physical violence. It can include emotional abuse, physical abuse, financial abuse. Domestic violence happens in all of our neighborhoods, whether you live in a downtown urban area, a highly rural community, whether you are an immigrant, LGBTQ+, whether you come from wealth, whether you don't, if you have disabilities, regardless of your income status. Domestic violence shows up in all of our communities and is part of the issues we all face as Californians. In a recent survey through the Blue Shield of California Foundation, nearly 2/3 of Californians say they are affected by domestic violence, either directly or indirectly. Nearly one-third identified as a survivor in that report. And of those identifying as survivors, almost 70% declined to report their abuse to police. So law enforcement is a vital response to this issue, but is not the only safety net and response needed to survivors. So I'm glad that we have folks from multiple state agencies here to talk about a holistic and comprehensive response. As some grounding, in 2024, there were 163,000 calls to law enforcement for domestic violence-related issues just here in California. That same year, 125 people were killed in a domestic violence homicide here in California. 74% of those were identified as female and 26% as male. The impacts are disproportionate across communities of color, with 39% of those murdered reported as Hispanic, 18% Black, 13% categorized as other, and 30% as white. Responding to domestic violence takes everybody, as I've said. So in addition to hearing from our state agencies today, I'll elevate that there are victim service providers all across the state. Help is available for survivors 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And to give you a sense of how many folks are reaching out and being served by programs, of the 102 domestic violence shelter-based programs here in California, in 2022 to 2023, they answered almost 149,000 hotline calls. They provided services to nearly 120,000 individuals. They provided emergency shelter nearly 227,000 times and provided transitional housing almost 78,000 times. That is just a glimpse into the work that they do every year. And I say all this as grounding because as the executive director of the California Partnership to End Domestic Violence, I have the immense privilege of getting to work with those service providers every single day. Partnership is ourselves not a direct service providing organization, so we work closely with domestic violence agencies across the state. And we work to support their direct services. We work to advance prevention, recognizing that this violence is not inevitable in our communities. And we work with our state partners, both to push for legislative changes and budget investments when needed at the state and federal level, and to help coordinate a strong response across the state. So it's really my honor and privilege to be here today with some colleagues to talk about how we respond as a state to domestic violence. So with that, I'm going to invite my colleagues on the panel to introduce themselves. I'm not going to read their bios to you all. I think you'd all much rather hear directly from our esteemed panelists. So if we can introduce our first panelist, go to the next slide. So Linda, I'll hand it back to you to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Trista. I want to tell you a little bit more about the Victims Compensation Board. We are a state-funded department that provides financial assistance for crime-related expenses. We are celebrating our 60th anniversary this year. Founded in 1965, California was actually the first state in the nation to create a program specifically designed to help victims of crime. Over the past 6 decades, CalVCB has assisted more than 1.7 million victims and dispersed over 2.7 billion in compensation. We support survivors of domestic violence and their families by reimbursing them for expenses related to the crime, such as relocation costs, lost wages, medical services, mental health treatment, residential security, and more. These resources we know are vital to helping survivors regain their independence and safety. In the last fiscal year, CalVCB received more than 7,000 domestic violence applications and paid out nearly $7.2 million in compensation to domestic violence victims. In general, victims have 7 years from the date of the crime to apply for compensation through CalVCB, and minors who are children of the victim and live in the same home may also qualify for assistance, and they have until their 28th birthday to apply. We pay bills that are not covered by any other source, such as insurance. And once an application is approved, victims may receive up to $70,000 in total compensation. This is a lifelong benefit until all funds are exhausted. There are a few payment category limitations for certain expenses. For instance, we can only pay $3,418 for relocation fees or $1,000 for additional home security. You can learn more about our program, including specific benefits about how to apply on our website, victims.ca.gov. We also encourage survivors to work with advocates at their local DA's office or through community-based organizations who can assist with the application process. We recently updated our online advocate portal to make it easier for advocates to support victims through the application process. So if you're an advocate who doesn't have access to this portal and you'd like to learn more, please reach out to us. The online application is available in English and Spanish. We also have paper applications that can be downloaded in 17 languages. All of these resources are vital in helping victims regain their independence and their safety, and we take very seriously our role in that process. We hope that you will learn more about CalVCB and our services, and there are clearly more victims and applications. So we know there are many people out there who could use our services, and we encourage you to find out more through our website. Thank you, and we'll turn it over to the next panelist to introduce their department. Liz, go ahead.
All right, thank you. Sorry about that. Good afternoon, everybody. I am Liz Hall, and I am the program director for California Safe at Home program. We are administered through the Secretary of State's office, and it's a pleasure to be here today. And I would love to tell you a little bit more about the Safe at Home program. We were established in 1999, and we serve as the state's address confidentiality program. And what that means is we provide those that have been a victim of certain crimes, such as domestic violence, and who are in fear for their safety. We provide them a substitute mailing address that they can use in place of their actual residential address. And this is a way for them to keep their residential address confidential. And the way it works is we assign them a substitute mailing address that they can use for all mailing purposes, but also when they go to any state or local government agency to create, update, or modify a public record. So if they sign up for a state program, they should be able to use their Safe at Home substitute address. If they go and they're part of a civil case in the courts, they should be able to use their Safe at Home address. And so what this does is it prevents their residential address from being found in public records or court documents. And so once somebody is in our program, we provide other services that they may be eligible for. And this includes becoming a confidential voter, which means their voting records are kept confidential. They can have their DMV records suppressed, meaning only a limited number of people have access to their DMV records. They may also be eligible to get a confidential name change, which means their new name will never be posted in any public records or announcements like regular name changes are. And then once somebody's in our program, in addition to those services I just mentioned that they may be eligible for, we do provide them mail forwarding service. So if they choose to use the substitute mailing address we give them, if they choose to use that for any mailing purposes, we will receive their mail first, and then we package it and forward it to their actual address. We also act as a service of process agent. So if they need to be served any legal documents, they can go through us first before they are forwarded to the participant. And that's another layer of protection that we offer. In order for somebody to enroll into our program, they do have to go through an enrolling agency. And we have over 300 of these across the state. And these are community-based organizations and district attorneys' offices that we partner with who assist victims and survivors in applying to our program, and they submit the application on behalf of their client. And I'll talk a little bit more about the enrolling agencies later. But you can find information about our program on our website, and the QR code is right there. But you can also find our list of enrolling agencies on the website, as well as sample applications, which we offer in 6 different languages. And I think that that's it. So again, thank you for having me today.
Thank you so much, Liz. Okay. I think Victoria will welcome you to the conversation.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Victoria Ramirez, and my pronouns are she, her, ella, and I am the Victim Services Manager with the California Department of Justice. And I am privileged to share with you the information on the unit's role and the amazing work our team of victim advocates and support staff provides survivors, victims, and their families. So about victim services, at the Attorney General's office, we serve all of 58 counties in California. We are dedicated to assisting and empowering all victims, survivors, and their families by connecting them with relevant and tailored resources. VSU works to provide victim-centered, trauma-informed, and culturally sensitive services to all crime victims, including underserved, at-risk, underrepresented, and vulnerable populations. Through the unit's services, victims can track the status of appeals, recusal cases, and other matters being handled by the Department of Justice prosecutors. Victim Services Unit has a dedicated and well-trained team of victim advocates who provide appeal notifications to victims and their families. These updates allow victims and their families to exercise their rights to address the court or otherwise participate in parole, clemency, and capital proceedings. Survivors of domestic violence may be experiencing an ongoing pattern of abuse, and oftentimes it is not an isolated incident of abuse, which is why survivors and victims can connect with victim services via our public phone line, online web forms, and direct email to get assistance from a victim services advocate. We use a language line interpreting system to ensure our services are accessible to individuals who speak languages other than English. Our unit responds to crime victim inquiries received on our public line and email system. We have 3 phone lines dedicated to one to appeals inquiries, another to sexual assault kit inquiries, and also for general questions for all other matters. We receive emails from individuals throughout the state, as well as victims who are inquiring from other states. Support looks like mediating crisis situations, linking victims to resources and services, navigation of the criminal justice system, empowerment via utilizing Marcy's victim rights, assistance with victim compensation, assistance with criminal restitution, updates on case status, court accompaniment, and serving as a liaison to law enforcement and the Deputy Attorney Generals. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Victoria. Thank you for being here. And now to our colleagues at the Department of Social Services, Joseph and Rainbow.
Thank you, Krista. And first, before I get started, I wanted to take an opportunity to thank the Victims Compensation Board and all you guys for attending today's meeting. Our team at the California Department of Social Services is responsible for implementing CalWORK's domestic abuse policy as it relates to survivors of domestic abuse. Our team is responsible specifically for not only creating policy, but also taking the time to update regulations and implementing bills such as AB 969 that help support survivors of domestic abuse. Our team also provides technical assistance in the form of our monthly webinar titled the Domestic Abuse Roundtable Engagement. And that particular webinar is a space where we bring counties together, talk about current policy, provide updates, and give counties to really engage in the community of practice as it relates to surviving survivors across the state. Our team is also responsible for, and we're currently in the process of updating our CalWORK's domestic abuse training. This particular training has not been updated for over 20 years. So needless to say that what was going on 20 years ago needs to be modernized and updated. And so we are in the process of working with several different partners in this regard, namely UC Davis, Mathematica, and Parent Voices to conduct listening sessions to not only understand the county perspective, but we also are going to be having sessions with survivors to make sure that all these voices are centered around really bringing together a comprehensive training that should be updated and really stand the test of time. We anticipate that this particular training will be released and updated in 2027. Future things that are kind of on our horizon are really trying to look at and understand what our data is telling us as it relates to survivors of domestic abuse. Oftentimes, when we look at our data, there's oftentimes an inconclusive picture about what waivers are provided, what exemptions are provided, and what additional services survivors are actually accessing. And so down the line, our hope is to really create an environment where we have data that's available that will allow us to make some informed decisions. In addition to that, as I just mentioned, we're going to be revising the domestic abuse training. And so our real goal with that is to not only provide our counties with a revised training environment, what we really are hoping to get at as a result of that is to start seeing some of our lagging indicators be reflective in that training. So again, as I mentioned, the waivers, exemptions, good cause that are issued, hopefully long-term, we should see an uptick in all of those lagging indicators that shows that counties are getting the resources and training that they need as a result. And the last thing that I'll kind of touch on, and Rainbow will touch on this a little bit more in the presentation, is that we want to make sure that that our resources that we are providing to counties is also up to date and modernized. So one of the major projects that our team has done is we've taken the time to update actually create our CalWORK's domestic abuse resources guide. And what this guide is basically a website that has domestic abuse resources by county for I think the majority of the counties across the state. I think there are probably a couple that did not provide us resources, but essentially what we're hoping to do is to continue to to keep this resource guide up to date, we're planning on adding an exit button to the website. So that way as survivors are engaging with the resource, that they can quickly get out of that site without any fear from an abuser. But, you know, as you can tell, our team is really up to a lot of great things as it relates to supporting survivors of domestic abuse. And again, we're appreciative of the opportunity to present in this space. So again, thank you, Krista, and thank you for the Victim Compensation Board for the opportunity. I'll let Rainbow jump in real quickly.
Hi, thank you, Joseph. I'm an analyst, part of the Domestic Abuse Technical Assistance team within the Family Services section here at CDSS, where we offer ongoing technical assistance from a trauma-informed and whole person perspective. We work with all 58 counties on building the capacity to identify, assist, and serve survivors effectively. This includes policy leadership, trainings, and direct program support, which we will talk more about later within the webinar. And as Joseph said, we have created the CDSS Domestic Abuse Resource Guide. It's a comprehensive and interactive map. It's created to help survivors who often relocate or seek services across county lines. This webpage was developed to promote consistent services and streamline the referral process. And we also conduct semi-annual updates to the guide, collaborating with each county to enhance the accessibility and to strengthen the referral networks so that survivors can access the specialized services that meet their unique needs. I love how user-friendly it is, and you can easily click into the counties, big or small, and all the resources are updated regularly, and they're all condensed into one web page. So if you haven't explored it yet, definitely take a moment to check it out. With that said, I'll pass it back over to you, Krista. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rainbow. Thank you to everyone for your introductions. I have to say, I never thought I'd be so excited about a handbook being updated as I am to see the work happening with the CalWORKs handbook revision and bringing it into the 2000s will be a nice update and revision. So thank you for all the work you all are up to. It's a busy time, I know, for everyone. So for all of you listening, we're gonna have a bit of a conversation. We've got some prepared questions we'll go through, but we also really want to make sure that we're answering questions you may have. So please do use the Q&A box to post any questions you have, and we'll make sure to weave those in towards the end of the conversation today. But as we get started, I want to focus first on some segments of the survivor population who may experience some particular barriers, and in particular, as we get started, to think about immigrant survivors who are often more reluctant to reach out to government services for fear of what that may mean depending on their immigration status. So I want to open this up to whoever feels like they would like to chime in. If you can speak to what immigrant survivors should know about accessing services through your agency. Victoria, I wonder if I can ask you to get us started on this conversation.
Yes, no problem. So Victim Services is here to offer assistance and resources to all victims of crime, no matter their immigration status. Resources are tailored to each victim's needs and locations for support. Our services help victims of crime like domestic violence, again, regardless of their immigration status. We offer clarifications on how to file police reports and protective orders, guidance on how to apply for victim compensation, and assistance locating agencies that offer legal support specific to the survivor's needs. These types of services safeguard the integrity of our law enforcement and criminal justice systems by enforcing that victims and witnesses of crime trust and collaborate with law enforcement and prosecutors that hold criminal offenders accountable. In addition, our unit refers to internal services at the Attorney General's office, which has an immigrant-specific resource. Some of those resources are Know Your Immigrant Rights and protections under the law, and also guidance for immigrant students and families. In addition, Protect Yourself from Immigration Scams, resources for employers, as well as resources to access free and low-cost legal assistance. And another one, information to file a complaint if you believe your rights have been violated. And there are other really helpful information that is immigrant focused. And again, these can all be located under our website, Resources for California's Immigrant Communities, at the State of California Department of Justice and the Office of the Attorney Generals. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Hi, I'll chime in on this for Cal VCB. So we're really committed to expanding access to underserved victims and increasing awareness of our program across immigrant communities. Last year, we launched our 3-year media campaign focused on spreading awareness in underrepresented areas of the state. And we've also added on an ethnic media campaign, which focused on non-English speakers, immigrants, and those with low incomes. And we're focused across 11 California counties with increasing crime rates. U.S. citizenship is not a requirement for our program. You need to be a resident of California or a person visiting California when the crime occurred. We also do not require a social security number to process your application. And I have to say that we are a federally funded program. So if the federal government were ever to subpoena us, we may have to turn over records. But for our program alone, right now, you do not have to be a citizen and you do not have to provide a social security number. We've translated most of our well-used materials into 15 different languages and into plain language and hopefully easy to understand documents that make sense to everyone. And we've also updated our frequently asked questions webpage to include translation in multiple languages. Again, with the hope that whoever comes to our site is able to find the information that they need in a way that makes the most sense to them and can be most helpful. So we certainly are doing our part. We hope to reach out to those communities to get the information out there and then to be accessible once they find us.
Thank you, Linda.
I'd like to chime in too. For the Safe at Home program, we are committed to serving all populations, especially those that are most vulnerable, that have been victims of certain crimes, such as domestic violence, human trafficking, sexual assault, stalking, child abduction, and elder or dependent adult abuse. In order to be eligible for our program, you just need to be a victim. You have to be in fear for your safety, and you need to be a resident of California. But other than that, we do not have any immigration or citizenship requirements in order to be eligible. And I wanted to note too that we are not federally funded. We are funded strictly through state general funds. And that's it. But we are committed, like I said, to helping everybody who needs our program. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. I can see that our Q&A box is working and I'm seeing questions come in. So thank you all. We'll keep an eye on those and group them together for some responses in just a bit, but we see them coming, so thank you. I also want to touch on ensuring that our services are accessible to other populations of survivors, including ensuring that our work is accessible and welcoming regardless of sexual orientation and gender identity, which has been a big topic this year. So I wonder if I can turn to our folks at the Department of Social Services to start there.
Yes, thank you, Krista. At CDSS, we're very intentional about making sure our services are inclusive and welcoming to all survivors, regardless of sexual orientation or gender identity. Our guidance helps counties create safe spaces where survivors feel seen, heard, and supported. We also take a trauma-informed whole person approach, recognizing that each person's experience is shaped by their identity and the barriers that they may face. That means meeting people where they are and validating their lived experiences. We promote the use of gender inclusive language and encourage partnerships with the LGBTQ plus and culturally specific organizations so that survivors can connect with affirming and knowledgeable providers. And finally, we invest in ongoing trainings for county staff to make sure that all survivors are treated with sensitivity and competence. Thank you.
Thank you, Rainbow.
I could jump in. So for victim services, we're actually housed in the Office of Community Awareness, Response, and Engagement, CARE, at the Attorney General's office. Attorney General Bonta created the Office of CARE with the mission to build relationships with communities that have historically been marginalized. Victim Services furthers this mission by conducting outreach to local government and non-government service providers and California's most vulnerable populations. Once again, emphasizing that Victim Services offers tailored services based on individual preferences. In the assessment of needs, victim advocates are trained to provide cultural humility services to affirm inclusivity and safety for the LGBTQI population. We avoid assumptions on gender or sexual orientation. We ask for pronouns to use their preferred pronouns and their preferred name. Going back to the Office of CARE, they recently held a LGBTQI plus event through CARE community briefings. And last month, they highlighted that a recently released State of Pride report, which compiles recent actions California Department of Justice has taken to defend the rights of LGBTQ plus communities amidst the rise in attacks on these rights across the nation. And if you want to watch that recording, you can find it at the CARE community briefing and other virtual programs on our website, on the Office of CARE's website. In addition, the Attorney General's office also offers information on how to identify and report hate crimes and incidences, and the services available to those victims. We welcome you to check out the hate crime and incidences brochure online, and also reach out to Victim Services if you yourself or you know someone that's been victimized of hate crime. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you both jumping in. I think that as we think about resources for Californians, we know resources are not always evenly distributed geographically, and that in this state, at least when I talk to folks outside of California, they sometimes forget we have very rural communities and we have a large Native and tribal population as well. So I'm curious if anyone here would want to speak about how you are reaching survivors in our rural areas, including our Native and tribal communities.
Yeah, I can start with that, Krista. Thank you. So at CalVCB, we definitely work hard to make sure that we are reaching all parts of the state. Obviously, we understand that in some areas it may be harder to have access to either the medical or mental health services that people might need. We do encourage everyone to work directly with their local victim advocate or their victim witness assistance center, which is usually located within the district attorney's office. Of course, it's not necessary to do that. Advocates do help offer direct support and guide victims through the CalVCB process. But there's a lot of self-applications as well. And it doesn't have to be someone within the DA's office. It could be a family justice center, domestic violence support center, or other community-based organizations. And so we know that those are throughout the state, and those may be good ways to receive resources, especially in rural parts of the state. We're continuing to work to build more trust and improve relationship with our Native American and tribal communities. We've participated in several events and conducted a lot of outreach. And we continue to work to make that effort. We know that it is a government to government relationship. And so there are different ways to approach that. We also know that Native American tribes may have their own resources that they can draw from. That means that they may not be needing CalVCB resources as much, but we do want to make sure that people are aware that we're here and can be helpful if at all possible. Thank you.
And to add for victim services, again, we are housed under the Office of Care, and they host the Survivor Centered Action Team, which is a statewide convening of direct service providers that meet on a quarterly basis. The Survivor Centered Action Team is inclusive with service providers that serve LGBTQI+, tribal, reentry, disabled, culturally specific, and youth throughout the state. Through this network, Victim Services is able to connect victims to appropriate supportive resources. Victim Services conducts outreach and trainings to local law enforcement and prosecutors' offices throughout the state, including rural and underserved communities, to raise awareness about victim services and understand the challenges facing those communities to close the gap in victim services. In addition, we're so thankful to collaborate with the Office of Native American Affairs, we call ONA, and specifically to victim services. We have a publication for Native American Marcy's cards that provides victim bills of rights. In addition, ONA's website provides tribal victim services locations by region, and that offers a list of organizations to aid victims who identify as Native American or Native. These tools and learnings about similar resources as such are often used and researched by our victim advocates to provide optimal support. And VSU supports victims at tribal events like Missing in Indian Country in collaboration with ONA. And this past September, we were really honored to participate in this year's Native American Day at the Capitol to connect with the tribal community and spread awareness about the services and resources we offer.
Thank you so much. Thank you both for speaking to that. Our Q&A box is full of really great questions. So I'm going to ask just two more that we had pre-planned, and then we'll start digging into what you all have been putting in the Q&A. So today is the 28th day of Domestic Violence Awareness Month, but I will name it's also very much on my mind that today is the 28th day of a federal government shutdown. And there's been a lot of information in the news of late about the impact that the continued shutdown may have on access to certain programs. So Joseph, I'm going to perhaps start with you. If you might be able to share how the continued shutdown may impact some of the social safety net benefit programs that survivors of domestic violence and others may rely on. And then I'll open it up for anyone else who may want to speak about any impacts on their agencies as well.
Sure, and thank you for the question, Krista. Where I want to start is just taking an opportunity to just acknowledge the just sheer difficulty of the moment that we're in. I don't think we've seen a moment like this in quite a long time. And for us as a department, we are taking kind of a balanced approach, really trying to take in and assess information as it comes in. And as you guys know, the information and the environment is changing almost daily. So to be very specific, our department has kind of taken an approach where we're observing the cash flow for both the CalFresh and CalWorks programs. And our department has made the decision that for our CalWorks program, that there won't be any real significant impact. And what that basically means is that, you know, recipients of the CalWORKS programs, they will be able to continue business as usual, be able to go into offices, apply for CalWORKS benefits, go through the assessment, go through the determination, and ultimately receive benefits if they're found eligible to receive those. On the CalFIRST side of the house, it is kind of a different story, where at the direction of the federal government, we have basically made this decision to stop the CalFIRST benefits from being issued in the month of November. Obviously, that is very dire news for many Americans who need those food benefits across the country. And so what we've done as a response is on the CDSS website, there is a bunch of communication that has been sent out about how counties can respond, and how counties are essentially still expected to keep their offices open. But, you know, again, acknowledging that the benefits will not be going out. The other piece that we've tried to do as well is just to make sure that counties are connected with local food banks to provide clients with resources that will allow them to still put food on the table and still be able to maintain as a result. And so for me, as we were doing our pre-prep, one of the things that I've attempted to do for myself was to try to get with my church and try to figure out how I can be actionable in this environment. So I would just kind of, if I can make a plea to everybody on the call, do the same. There are a lot of people who are out there that really need our help and need our support, and we have an opportunity to do something. And if that something is just finding someone who you know that is on CalFIRST benefits and helping pay for their groceries, great. If it means connecting them to food banks and providing that level of support, do that. But I think this is really a call for us to all find something that we can do to support millions and millions across the country who are in dire need of our help. So again, Krista, thank you for the question.
Thank you so much for speaking to that, Joseph.
And I think I just want to add on for CalVCB, we do receive federal funding through the VOCA grant, the Victims of Crime Act funding. However, the way our grant is structured, we don't actually, it doesn't impact our current year spending, and we haven't seen any interruptions in our grant at this time due to the federal shutdown. So we're business as usual. There is no issue with the federal shutdown and our grant at this time. So we're happy to report that.
That's great. Thank you, Linda. I know for the domestic violence service providers we work with, many of whom receive federal funding, right? They continue to provide services and show up every day to support survivors. And I know all of you are doing the same. So I want to end this part before we pivot to the Q&A that's been coming in with perhaps a more uplifting question than what I just asked, which is, I would love if you all can share how you see your program empowering survivors and victims of domestic violence. Liz, I wonder if you want to get us started here.
Sure. All right. So when somebody has left a dangerous situation or have experienced a traumatic experience at the hands of somebody else, one of their biggest fears is being found if they've relocated. And so what we offer people in these situations is a chance to start over with a sense of safety that maybe they haven't had before. And not to say they're going to feel 100% safe, but at least they'll have a better sense of safety. And so allowing people to maybe live their lives, maybe be able to vote like everyone else can vote, be able to change their name if they want to. We offer a variety of services through the Safe at Home program that really empowers victims and survivors to start over, to have a better sense of safety. And I think anyone who has gone through terrible experiences, when they seek services, you know, that is just such a journey because it requires so much vulnerability. It requires them to, you know, be able to read instructions, complete forms, just do all these things, tell their story about what happened. And so I think when they get to Safe at Home, you know, we do our best to, you know, make it as easy as possible for them to get into our program. But the fact that they've made it that far, I think, you know, they've already, you know, hopefully feel some sense of empowerment. And we just provide additional, you know, sense of safety that allows them to go on to live their lives a little bit more freely. So that's how we help empower victims and survivors. Thank you.
Yeah, I love that.
I can chime in. So for domestic violence survivors and their families, you know, we understand they may need support at any point of their healing journey and through navigation of the criminal case process. So at any stage of an abusive cycle, victim services can link survivors to resources and services they are seeking or considering, and definitely just be empathetic to their situation and listening to them and their concerns, or just going through their process. Victim Services acknowledges that although a case may be closed or past the conviction phase at a local level, or even not have a criminal matter or report at all, survivors may still want some support with resources and understanding the criminal justice system and how to implement their victims' Marcy's rights. So we're definitely there to provide them that information and empower them to utilize the resources accessible to them. Advocates provide, again, tailored resources to each survivor based on their needs and their location. Advocates offer survivors an overview of Marcy's Law and Victims' Bill of Rights to empower victims, of course, with the permission of each survivor. Some of those rights in the field of navigation of a criminal matter can be really important for their safety. So victims can use these rights in the sense of victim safety considerations in setting bail and release conditions. They can conference with the prosecution and notice of pretrial dispositions, notice and presence at public proceedings, appearances at court proceedings, and expression of their views. For non-criminal case-related services, these typically look like referrals to legal resources in civil and family law, resources for mental health support, along with information to other local services.
CDSS can touch on this as well. There's many ways that our program empowers victims and survivors. It's through a combination of policy leadership, funding, training, and direct program support, but I'll talk mostly about policy and program guidance. CDSS issues guidance in the form of ACL. These are all county letters. And a specific letter that our team wrote is the ACL 23-109, which provides updated guidance to help counties better support CalWORKs participants who are survivors of domestic abuse. It focuses on confidentiality, trauma-informed practice, and survivor-centered approaches to ensure that survivors feel safe and respected when they are seeking help. The ACL provides guidance on the flexibilities of domestic abuse waivers, giving survivors time to focus on safety and healing without losing their benefits. And by strengthening partnerships with the counties, together we can help connect the survivors to specialized services and supports that they need to rebuild stability. So with that said, I'll pass it back over to you, Krista. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rainbow. Thank you all. Okay, I am gonna come into the Q&A that's been coming in, and if you've been holding on to a question, please do put it in. I'm going to consolidate a few to get us started. Linda, I can see several questions about eligibility for victims' compensation, and a couple of questions in particular about the advocate online access, what the goal is of that, what it's supposed to do, and also how can you become an advocate with that access?
Yeah, thank you, Krista. So the Advocate Portal is an expansion of our online system, and it's really designed for authorized representatives of victims to be able to access some information about that victim's application online, right? So without having to call our 1-800 number to get information about the status of an application. Again, it's for previously, we worked very closely with victim witness advocates in DA's offices, but we know that some victims don't go there, especially for domestic violence victims where a police report is not required to be eligible for a victim's comp. They may never go to a DA's office, so they may be speaking to someone who works at a shelter or something like that, a domestic violence shelter. So we have done a lot of webinars about how to become an advocate and how to sign up. And a lot of that information is on our website. So you can go to victims.ca.gov and start digging in. And if you have any problems and you can't find any of that information, please email publicaffairs@victims.ca.gov and they will help you locate that webinar and find out how you can access that information.
Thank you, Linda. Liz, I would love to lift up for you a couple of specific Safe at Home questions. So some questions about enrolling and whether applications can be submitted online. And then also some logistical questions about what qualifies. So one very specific question of whether or not parental kidnapping is a qualifying crime. And a logistical question around packages. Have heard that sometimes receiving packages is challenging for folks enrolled. And if so, if that is true and not an urban myth, what some workarounds maybe. So kind of a couple of questions about how the program works, how to get involved.
All right. I saw a couple more too, so I might be able to answer
Sure.
those. All right, so as far as the online application, so as I mentioned, we have enrolling agencies that we work with. We have over 300 across the state. Some of them have access to an online portal that they can complete the application right there online and submit it to us online, but they're the only ones that have access to it. So if you contact one of our enrolling agencies, you can ask them about that online portal, but it's not, access is not available to the applicant. It's to the application assistant at that enrolling agency, but it does make it faster to submit an application and easier. Regarding if parental kidnapping is an eligible victim type, it is not. We are limited to the ones outlined in our legislation, which I mentioned, which is domestic violence, human trafficking, stalking, sexual assault, child abduction, and elder or dependent adult abuse. As far as packages, that is a limitation for our mail forwarding. We cannot forward packages or medications or magazine subscriptions, things like that. We do ask our participants to find a trusted friend or family member who can accept packages on their behalf, or to get an Amazon locker, or they can get something at the Postal Service as well to accept those types of deliveries. There was a question about digital or tech abuse assistance. And that is one service I forgot to mention, so thank you for bringing that up. We do offer an online privacy protection service that's available through the AG's office, Attorney General's office, and there is a portal specific for Safe at Home participants in which they can submit a request to have their information removed from certain websites. So it is something that the participant does have to do for themselves, but we provide the information on how to do that. And then as far as the immigration status, in order to be eligible for our program, we do not ask any immigration questions or have any requirements for immigration status or citizenship. As far as changing your name, if you are going, you have a specific type of immigration status, it really is up to the courts and what their requirements are for people that are seeking a confidential name change. But we don't have any limitations on that on our end. And then I think that is it. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay. We had one question asking if this webinar can live on the partnership's website and be updated every so often so that it can exist as an onboarding tool for new employees at domestic violence organizations.
So this is for CalVCB. We are recording this webinar, so we can have it posted on our website. I don't know that we can update it. However, I do want to use this opportunity to point out that on all of our websites, we have put together a one-pager that talks about all of the state programs that impact victims. Because we know that we are spread out throughout the state and don't house in just one state entity. And we know that can be challenging for people. So at CalVCB a few years ago, I created what we call the State Victim Coordination Council. So we try to get together and coordinate amongst state partners so that we can make sure that we're all talking to each other. And we do have a one-page flyer that lists all the entities that help victims, and that you can find on most all of our websites. I know it's on the CalVCB website, so you can always go there and get the most recent information as well.
And I will make a shameless plug that the partnership just updated our website. So our communications team has been very busy this Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And so we can certainly look at making sure we have links as well for individuals who would like some of these ongoing resources. And I always love being on webinars with you all. So happy to do another version of this sometime in 2026 or whenever is needed. So another question that came in was about criminal charges and CalVCP. So Linda, I think you touched on the fact that criminal charges are not required, but two related questions. One was if the DA doesn't file charges, is the victim eligible to apply? And then related was what percentage of VCB applications are approved without a crime report?
Yeah, so let me take those questions a little bit separately. So I want to be really clear that no matter what type of crime victim, whatever type of crime you're a victim of, there do not need to be charges filed or prosecuted or anyone convicted in order to receive CalVCB services. So if you're a family member who's a victim of a homicide or something else, there do not need to be charges filed for you to be eligible for CalVCB services. Even further, for domestic violence, sexual assault, human trafficking, child sexual assault, there does not need to be a police report filed. You can simply we need documentation from either a medical provider or a mental health provider. There are different ways, and this is all again on our website, how you can be eligible. So for those very specific crimes, it's called it out in statute that we don't need a police report. I would tell you, I don't know off the top of my head the percentage of applications that we approve without police reports, but there are only certain crime categories where we're allowed to take something other than a crime report. And we have a lot of data on our website and our annual report. So that could probably be sussed out. But because there's very specific crimes where we don't need a crime report, it would be those crimes that would allow those victims to be eligible for our program without having filed a police report.
Thank you, Linda. I know that we are at time and there are many more questions and things we could spend easily another hour or two talking about, but I am going to make sure that we wrap up now. So I really want to just appreciate everyone for joining us today. Thank you for being part of this conversation and adding in questions. Thank you to all of our panelists for being here, and Linda and the CalVCB team for organizing us. As Domestic Violence Awareness Month comes to an end, I will just make a continued pitch that the work to address domestic violence never really ends. programs, and that we are all here as resources throughout the year, and grateful to California for so many state agencies invested in responding to the needs of survivors and communities. So thank you all for the work that you do and for being here today. Thank you everyone for joining us, and please reach out with questions.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Krista.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.